Tonight, I finally see Spider-Man No Way Home. Leading up to its release, I've been reviewing the Spider-Man movies that I previously hadn't reviewed on my channel. This is the final part of the series, and we're talking about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comments. No need for spoiler warnings, and if you haven't seen the movie yet, you have been warned. Now, as we go into this, I actually did review The Amazing Spider-Man 2 on my channel. 2 years before I started Sean Chandler Talks About. I'd done several experiments trying to start a YouTube channel before it actually clicked, and one of those movies that I reviewed when it first came out was The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Here's some of the things I had to say back then. So starting off with the good, this movie has some great relationships. That's really, throughout the movie, that's what really works. And there's all these plot lines that didn't feel like they meshed together. They didn't feel like they needed to be there. You could easily take half the plot lines they had and totally cut them out of the movie and nothing would have been lost. Kind of enjoyable when the action's happening, but it's goofy, it's way too long, the tone is all over the place, it's very serious, and then it's goofy. So, do I agree with myself? We'll find out in just a moment. So with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, this is a film that's pretty infamous for Sony meddling with the film behind the scenes quite a bit, and you see that in the end result. It seems like there was the movie that Mark Webb wanted to make and was passionate about, and then there's all the stuff that Sony wanted to try to accomplish with the film. They openly stated their plans to do a Sinister Six movie and spin-offs and sequels, and they put so much pressure on this film that I think it ended up failing at everything it was trying to do, so much so that we never got an Amazing Spider-Man 3 or that Sinister Six movie, and they just ended up rebooting the entire thing with the Tom Holland universe tied to the MCU. With that said, let's get started with the good. And just like I said with my review of The Amazing Spider-Man, the best thing about this film is the character moments. Mark Webb plays the dramatic moments, the romantic moments, the banter moments, not like they're in a comic book movie, but like he's telling a drama or a dramedy. And so they feel grounded and realistic. It feels like two people having a real conversation, having real conflict with one another, and so you buy into it. Very much to that point, a big part of the reason why all of that works is because Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are so good in acting in a realistic fashion. They play like someone that you know, that's charming and likable. They don't play like a movie star with a bunch of overwritten quips. You believe in them as characters, you believe in their relationship, and that is absolutely still true in this movie. At its core, the movie's all about Peter Parker trying to honor Gwen's father's request while at the same time being in love with her and trying to respect the fact that she's a person herself that gets to make independent choices, and neither her father or him gets to decide what she does as an adult. And so that kind of runs throughout the film. And when the movie focuses in on that, the scenes are really good. They are great as performers. And then as you lead into the final little bit where Gwen finally dies, it's just gut-wrenching. It is a fantastic sequence with the way that it plays out, the way that it's directed, the performances, the acting, the shot that they choose for how she ends up dying, with Peter catching her just a moment too late and seeing her just snap down towards the ground. It's gut-wrenching. And the dread in her eyes, the reaction from him, it doesn't play like a campy, over-the-top comic book movie death. It just plays like this dramatic moment where someone has failed the person they cared about the most. They've failed a promise that they made to that person's father, and they've lost the love of their life, and it's destroyed them. That stuff in this movie is fantastic. Likewise, Dane DeHaan, another great actor that just kind of when Harry in the movie is Harry's Peter's friend. You buy into their past relationship, the dynamic between them. It's fun to get a little glimpse into a different side of Peter's life and having someone kind of toy with him just a little bit, but someone that cares about him in the same way. And so just those little touches when it's about the characters, the movie is really good. Also, the visual effects here are largely great. Some of the stuff with overly blue Electro, okay, sure, that's too cartoonish. But there's all sorts of other stuff in here that's just great. All the Spider-Man stuff where he's swinging, the CGI, the technology got to the point where it just looks great. When they start doing the ultra slow-mo stuff in Times Square where Electro's shooting electricity, Spider-Man's desperately trying to stop everyone. I mean, it's obviously full CGI and it just looks fantastic. Like we've gotten to the point where you can do that and it looks amazing. And even just by contrast, this movie was 7 years after Spider-Man 3. And Spider-Man 3 did some of this stuff and the people looked a little bit rubbery, not enough detail in the faces. The physics was just a little bit off. By this movie, they had it figured out and it looks great. When the action happens, it's dynamic, it's exciting, and the sequences are a lot more memorable than in The Amazing Spider-Man. One of my issues with The Amazing Spider-Man is that there's a good bit of action in the movie, but not a lot of it really stands out. They're not memorable sequences. It's not poorly done, but besides the crane sequence, like people don't really talk about things in that movie, whereas when it comes to this movie, there's not as much action, but the three main action sequences all kind of stand out. You remember the intro chase with the Rhino. It's a kind of classic Spider-Man chase. And then the one in Times Square, you remember it because the visuals are just so cool, such vibrant colors, such big scale, big crowds and everything like that. And then, of course, you remember the clock tower with Gwen falling and Peter desperately trying to save her. Those are great sequences that actually stand out and are memorable in your mind, whereas that just wasn't really the case with The Amazing Spider-Man. So when it comes to this movie, I do think it has some good aspects to it. Two leads, still fantastic. Character moments, still great. Visuals, gotten to a great point. Memorable action sequences, got them. Big emotions when Gwen dies, absolutely. But the actual flow of the film itself, the story as a whole, the script as a whole, there's a lot of problems with this movie, unfortunately. So let's move on to the bad. When it comes to this movie, I actually feel bad that the movie as a whole isn't better. Because you can see how much passion was poured into certain moments. You can tell Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are giving it their all, and that Mark Webb really cared about getting those emotional sequences just right. But then the movie as a whole is just such a bizarre mix, overloaded with characters, overloaded with subplots, and a tone that is just wildly out of control. This is the sort of movie where I would love to see an honest, candid interview with the director discussing what went on behind the scenes, what he was trying to do, what the studio was mandated, him owning the pieces where he really dropped the ball, and just allowing us to know exactly how you got a film like this. I think one of the big issues at its core is that there was only a 2-year turnaround between The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And this can work. 2-year turnarounds can work. Spider-Man 2 came only 2 years after the first Spider-Man, and I think Spider-Man 2 is a great film, and most of you like it even more than I do, and I think it's great. But here, it didn't work. And I think some of that is because Sony's plans weren't just, let's just try and tell a great story. They had ambitions beyond that. This movie didn't need to just tell a great story. It also needed to set up all of this other stuff. in which case they start mandating plot points, mandating characters that need to be there. And then you have a director that signed on because there was something in this material that he was passionate about. You have actors that signed on because there was something in the material they were passionate about. And at a certain point in time, when you don't have a length of time to work on your script and get all the ideas you're interested in and then whittle them down to what's at the core, what's the most efficient way to do it, you just have to run with all of it and everything's just kind of thrown in there. It's pretty well known with this film that it was dramatically reworked in the editing room. Shailene Woodley was cast as MJ. She was going to be in this movie as MJ, and they were editing the film and they just kind of went, oh, crap, this doesn't work. No one in the audience wants to see Peter Parker be devastated that the love of his life died, he failed, and then in the next scene have him meet a new girl that's even better. That plays horribly in a movie. And that's the sort of thing that anyone with common sense knows that. But when you're just desperately trying to write your script and set everything up and make everything happen, you rush through plot points to try and get everything in there. There's all these shots in the trailers that aren't in the movie. There's all these subplots in the film about Oscorp, because everyone gets a subplot. We'll talk about that even later. Some of them don't really go anywhere. They're underdeveloped. They're just kind of mentioned. And it's like, what were they trying to do with all of this? And then likewise, after the movie came out and didn't get the best reception, there's interviews with Andrew Garfield where he openly says, you know, we signed on for this movie we were so passionate about, and it was really great with these deep layered character arcs. And then they started just having to cut away at things. And when you cut things away, you start to lose the heart of the film. The star of the movie openly said that the year the movie came out. And I think you can see that in the film, that they just threw everything in there, ran with the script that they had to try and get it done, to have these pristine visual effects and this big, gigantic story, but they didn't have enough time to focus the story, pull it all together in a way that has all the emotion, but it's also consistent and clear, developed properly. And instead, you just get this movie that just feels like a jumbled mess. So what is a jumbled mess about this film? Well, right off the bat, the tone is out of control on this film. It starts off with almost like this spy movie sequence about the Parkers getting on a plane to escape, and then turns out someone's on the plane, killed the pilot, and they're going to jump out from a parachute, which in and of itself is a very kind of cliche sequence for a totally different genre of film. And then you have the Parkers uploading stuff, and they're so sad that they're not going to be able to raise their son, and then they get killed and the plane crashes. And then we cut to this cartoonish action sequence with the Rhino, who's I don't know what was going on, if they just here, Paul Giamatti, here's 5 Red Bulls, a mound of cocaine, go at it. But he's like, the spider, I get the spider. Doing that stuff. And we're 30 seconds after dramatic sequence where parents died. And then Peter runs into Electro in nerd form, and it's a total caricature cartoon where they give Jamie Foxx this comb over thing of the bald guy trying to pretend like he's not bald, the pocket protector. I mean, it's over the top cartoonish version of a nerd, awkward guy. And it of course rings a little bit hollow because Jamie Foxx is a total stud. His birthday was yesterday, just turned 54. The guy is still just an absolute stud. And so it rings hollow when you try and make someone that's very attractive and you just give them a ridiculous haircut and put glasses on them and be like, see, look at this nerdy guy, as if he's still not a stud. It's just play every over-the-top nerdy caricature. Once again, we're 30 seconds away from parents dramatically dying. And then intercut with this sequence with Paul Giamatti going, oh, spider, doing that stuff. You have Gwen Stacy at her high school graduation giving a speech about death, foreshadowing her character's death. Like it's parallel running, two things running parallel, cartoon guy, and we never know when we're gonna die. Live the life that we can, it's doing that stuff.
What makes life valuable is that it doesn't last forever. What makes it precious is that it ends
at the same time. And then we finish action sequence, go to the graduation, and you have this very serious, somber sequence about reflecting on the death of Gwen's father, our own mortality, consequences. And the whole movie runs like that, between Guy in cartoonish fashion falling into a pit filled with electric eels and gaining superpowers that correct his teeth, followed by very grounded, dramatic moment between two people in love trying to figure out how to make their lives go ahead in the same direction and not being torn apart by their different directions or whatever. Like, running parallel right to each other. Just the simple fact that, our villains in the movie, over the top, Rhino, cartoonish Electro, and then they do Green Goblin, and he turns into a literal goblin. He literally starts turning into a goblin. And then we have Gwen Stacy dramatically falling to her death. That's the whole movie. It just feels like it's all over the place. And so it's tough to feel grounded in the film. You can go cartoonish, you can go grounded, you can go serious, you can find ways to have things that are very different in the same film, but it needs to feel like one person directed all of it, not like Mark Webb directed the dramatic moments and then they brought in someone else to do these cartoonish action sequences. But it doesn't. It feels like, or like I said, it feels like multiple people directing each sequence in the film, or each different sequence in the film, and then cramming it all together in the editing room. And along these same lines of the movie just having too much of everything, including too many tones, it has way too many subplots. Just take Green Goblin, for example. Harry Osborn, for example. His father is dying, and the father dies. Therefore, he moves back to town. Therefore, he takes over the company while the CEO is trying to investigate him and undermine him. And he's dying of a new disease. And he's restoring his friendship with Peter. And he experiments on himself and turns himself into an actual Green Goblin. And I probably missed some too. That's a lot of plot for one of three villains that are in the film. And everyone has a subplot. Aunt May has this whole subplot about her getting a job, becoming a nurse. It just goes nowhere. And there's plot lines about where Gwen is going to go to college, and is she going to leave, and is she going to stay? Are they breaking up? Are they staying together? We dive even deeper into Peter Parker and his parents. And so we really see they were trying to escape, and their backstory ties into the sickness that's in the Osborn family. And that's what all these experiments were all about. And there's a secret lair that's actually under the ground that if Peter throws a phone at the ground, he'll discover tokens. And if he puts the pieces together, he finds the right place, puts the tokens in, and a secret lair comes out of the ground that who knows how his dad was able to afford and secretly build a secret lair in a subway station. But that happens, and we learned that Peter Parker wasn't random that he got Spider-Man powers, that there was genetic code stuff in all this stuff. This is just like one subplot of many. All these things got going on at the same time and we'll get back to this one too, because I think there's a problem with the fact that suddenly in all of this conspiracy theory, it makes Peter Parker the chosen one, the only person that could get these powers. We'll come back to that. There's just so many subplots that you can't develop them. As mentioned before, they brought in Shailene Woodley to be MJ, though they cut the sequences. They hired Felicity Jones to be Felicia Hardy to set her up to be Black Cat. I mean, there was just so many things they were trying to set up with this movie, so many subplots that everything just kind of gets lost in the mix. You could pick any one of these of why was this in the movie? Where was this going? How did it build towards anything? Why didn't it pay off? Because they just threw everything into the film. And when you do that, everything starts competing against one another and it chokes everything out. Kind of expand a little bit more on some of our villains. First off, the Rhino. I know we want to have the character show Spider-Man in doing kind of these montaged rescue sequences. I'm totally fine with that. I don't understand the performance. I don't understand the characterization. I'd be totally fine with the fact that Rhino's in the kind of the bookends the film. But why on earth, where were they going with this performance? What was this? Just take any scene with Andrew Garfield or Emma Stone acting in either one of these amazing Spider-Man films and put it next to any second of Paul Giamatti's performance. They just don't go together whatsoever. I don't get it, what they were going for. And of course, it is weird at the end of the film to set up an action sequence that you put in the trailer. You put the shot in the trailer. This is the last shot in the movie. And right as something interesting is about to happen, it just ends. Weird choice. Strange direction to go with things. Electro, once again, very cartoonish considering how grounded the dramatic moments are. But more importantly, this villain character arc, I've never really been a big fan of. Riddler, Batman Forever, Syndrome, Killian in Iron Man 3, the idea of the nerdy person that becomes obsessed with the hero and then they get shunned by the hero and thus they suddenly have scorn for the hero. I don't find it very interesting or compelling, and it's all always played so over the top with the way they make the person a nerd that they're just like this ridiculous weirdo. And then the way in which they're shunned, it's like, the hero didn't really do anything that wrong. Okay, Tony Stark did in Iron Man 3. He's kind of a jerk, but that's his whole arc. He was a jerk. But like these other ones that weren't really shunned all that much, certainly not enough to justify them turning into these psychopathic supervillain people that are doing all these things. And when you like have moments where like, what's motivating Electro in this film? You didn't get a birthday cake or something. Like didn't get like a birthday card, and then he's getting attention in Times Square, but then they put Spider-Man's face up. These aren't the best motivations for a villain. And so I never really buy into it. It's never, you can hear it in my takes on almost all of these. I just don't really like this character arc. And it's such a template that we've seen so many times in prominent comic book movies over the last 30 years. And then with Green Goblin, I like the Harry stuff. I think there is something to what they were doing, but it took Harry's dad, it took Norman 30 years to turn into a goblin. Like, it is very much established. He spent his whole lifetime trying to fight this, wasn't able to fight it, dies at like 65 years old, which is, it's young, it's below the average, but it's not crazy young. And Harry is so desperate that it's like, Spider-Man won't give him his blood immediately. There's like, then I gotta experiment on myself. Like, the movie, I don't think established nearly enough why this is so urgent that Harry has to do something right now. And then it doesn't really explain all of the implications. Like, why did he literally just like turn into a sociopathic killer? There probably was additional footage, things that were deleted that would flesh all that out, explain exactly what was going on. But when you have so many subplots, your movie can't be 4 hours long. You don't get to be Zack Snyder. So I guess gets trimmed down to this most simple, bare bones version of it, to where it just rings empty of like, he killed her because he went crazy. That's it. That just feels like there needed to be more for such an emotional, impactful moment, sequence, plot point. A few more things I wanted to touch on here. The score on this one, they went in this direction of trying to use the music, the score to kind of communicate the voices that are in Electro's head. I don't think it works. I think for some people, they like the experiment. They did something different and paid off for them. For me, it doesn't. It's distracting. It's weird. When we were rewatching the movie a couple of days ago, my wife legitimately was like, where are these voices coming from? Like, what's going on with the movie? Is there like two tracks playing? Like, oh, no, that's the soundtrack in the movie. They put the voices in his head in the music, so it's to the beat. But that's the voices in Electro's head. She's like, oh, that's distracting and not clear at all. Like, yeah. They tried something. Credit to them for that. It definitely did not pay off for me. Another thing I really want to talk about, I touched on this just a little bit ago, but so one of the plot points in this film is that Peter discovers that his dad was working on all this engineering stuff. He engineered the spider and he put Parker DNA in the spider. Therefore, the only person that could get the powers, harness it, would be a Parker. And so Peter stops being a random normal kid that just happened to be bit by a radioactive spider and chooses to make right choices. And he becomes the chosen one. He becomes the only person that this could happen to. In a lot of ways, that undermines the Spider-Man mythology, which is, I love the hero's journey, the classic hero's journey of the chosen one, whether Luke Skywalker, Neo in the Matrix. I love that story, but that's not Spider-Man's story. Not everyone is the chosen one, and that's what has always made Spider-Man so relatable, is that he's just this normal kid that comes from a very modest upbringing that doesn't have a lot of money. He's smart, but he also is being raised by his aunt and uncle, and something amazing happens to him, and he has to learn with great power comes great responsibility. But the whole point is he's a normal kid, totally normal kid. That is the whole premise. Not that his dad is intertwined with the exact thing that turned him into a superhero and put his genetic code in there so that it could happen to him. And that all these other people are trying to gain these superpowers, genetically creating all this stuff. It wasn't just this accident that created this hero. It was all intentional. There was an element that was accidental, but it was created on purpose for this purpose, in a sense. I think you just lose so much of the heart of the Spider-Man story by doing all of this, adding all of this into the mix. And I didn't immediately put that together when I first watched the movie, and just in some analysis I've seen. As soon as someone pointed that out, because some of it I just missed it in all of the convoluted stuff in the film. It's like an afterthought that Peter goes into this subway station and he sees a video from his dad and they just kind of mention it. Then the movie drops that plot line and we go on to the next plot line, or the next 20 plot lines. But when you pay attention to what is actually established in the film, I think it undermines the Spider-Man mythology in the way that we love it, care about it. And that's what's so heartbreaking about this film. There's so many things that are great, but as a whole, I just don't think it works at all. I think there's too many plot lines choking each other out. The tone switches scene to scene. Sometimes sequences are even intercut that the tone just does not match at all. Whatsoever at all. And it's a movie that did not know what the target was, didn't know what it was aiming for. So it aimed for everything. And they shot everything, and then they tried to make something in the editing room. And you just can't do that. You need to know what the movie you're trying to make. You need to agree between director, studio, writer. You need to agree the film we want to make when you go into it. And they hadn't done that. And so you're trying to make it as you go along, piece it together in the editing room. And the end result is a movie that has great moments, but definitely doesn't work as a whole. Real quick, before I give you my final score on this one, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on the amazing Spider-Man 2. Also, remember, this is part of a series where I'm reviewing all the Spider-Man films. You can check out my other reviews right up here. And as I'm seeing No Way Home tonight, there will be tons more Spider-Man content coming over the next week. When it comes to the amazing Spider-Man 2, I still think Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are great. Mark Webb pours so much emotion and heart into the character moments and the death of Gwen Stacy. But the movie as a whole just tries to do way too many things, has way too many tones, and so none of it is properly developed. None of it pays off properly. A bunch of it goes absolutely nowhere, and all of it ends up choking everything else out. So it's a movie with a few high highs, but mostly just a bunch of low lows. Overall, it's a C. On the entertainment scale, I will go 5.5, and this is one that you can skip unless you're a hardcore Spider-Man or comic book movie fan. But of course, if you're watching this review, you've almost certainly already seen the film. So that's my take on it. Check out my other reviews right over there. Check out my rankings right over there. Thank you so much for watching. and keep talking movies too much.